Oh, wait. I'm doing a different thing tonight. So I got to hit the thing.
Oh, you came too early, yes, man. Normally, I mean, you came in before your album dropped.
Yes.
He beat me to it.
Yes.
Oh, there's that echo.
Yeah, yes, man. Did you watch the Solo movie?
Yes.
Was it a big crowd the night you watched? Oh dear.
Oh, man.
I was trying to give you at least two more yeses before I got to the question of whether or not it was good.
So as it turns out,
Hold on. Are we doing the spoiler? If we do the spoiler, we should play music under it so people know when it's over.
well, let me. All right, here. So here's non-spoiler stuff.
Okay.
Because a lot of this, most of my interest in Solo the movie was in payoff to texts that I've had with Brian. So one of the texts was me looking for tickets for Solo and seeing that the entire Alamo Drafthouse theater, the one in which many, at least when I went to go see Rogue One there, it was like the Lucasfilm place to see the movie. Like they had Lucasfilm people come up and thank everybody for making this movie possible before the movie started. Everybody was like cheering. It was kind of like a company event. And yet when I texted Brian, I'm like, this shit is empty. It is San Francisco on opening night for Solo. This shit will tank. And then I realized the tickets had only been on sale for 5 minutes, and that at the 30 minutes later, the entire theater was sold out. And I was like, well, I fucked up. But we wound up getting 2 tickets. And yet, despite the fact that we know for a fact that that theater was all but sold out, there were like a lot of empty seats. Like people decided that they didn't want to go after buying tickets to Solo, apparently.
On opening night?
On opening night.
Wow.
Just
Holy
shit that will bode, that was like an ominous foretelling of what the box office would be.
Was that a Friday showing or a Thursday preview day?
Thursday 7. Like the fucking
when it should
we're
been busy.
old but we also like movies showing that I prefer.
Wow.
So I will set up everything and then we will have the spoiler talk.
I will play music over the spoiler talk, and when it's over, there will not be some. So if you're listening to
There
the
will
audio,
not be music. All right.
you'll
So
skip it. So tell me when
I
to play the
read
song.
a review. This is a light spoiler, but I don't think it's a big thing if you are aware of how these movies have gone. That there was a gratuitous cameo in the third act of Solo that was there to set up future Solo movies. And so immediately I ran to my phone and texted Brian and Andrew and said, look, I just read this spoiler. We need to gossip for the next week as to what the shittiest possible gratuitous cameo could be. And so, the most likely we determined were Jabba, Boba Fett, people that are already tangentially connected to Han Solo that he knows before he comes into episode 4. That would make the most sense, right? Also fan favorites. But then the ridiculous options came. Dexter Jetster or the lady Jabba the Hutt from that one Clone Wars movie.
Which one from the Clone Wars? I missed that.
There was a lady Jabba the Hutt.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Brian, you have not seen Solo.
Oh, are we moving into spoiler territory now?
Let me just the final setup. And you have not heard. I don't know why I'm doing the magician's fucking mentalist setup. You don't know. This is a free and complete choice.
Yes. No. There's nothing up my sleeves. I definitely have not dialed in. I've not read a single review of Solo. I've not seen Solo because I knew Bonnie would literally punch me in the face if we went to Australia and I was like, let's go watch Solo.
Gotcha.
And so I know nothing except for I did see the 2 trailers. That's it.
Bryce, cue the music.
All right, here is our spoiler music. That's Rax by Dirty Audio.
Brian, The movie centers around Han Solo's dealings with a dangerous criminal cartel. At the end, there is a succession where the evil person is vanquished and a new person steps in. They then call the real head of this cartel, and it is revealed to be
Greedo?
Darth Maul.
What the fuck?
And just in case you don't know it's Darth Maul, he pulls out his lightsaber and turns on both of them and does a little spin.
But wait, Darth Maul was killed in a movie that took place before this one.
No, shouts everybody for whom I've brought up exactly what you've just said. But in the cartoons, he had metal legs and then became a gangster.
Oh, dear. And I'm sure they communicated all this because it's not like they would hang the expectation that worldwide audiences would only understand this scene if they had watched the fucking cartoons. So definitely they put something in the fucking movie to spell that out for everyone, right?
Absolutely, Brian. If by spelling it out for everybody, you mean he pulled out his lightsaber and did a little twirl.
God damn it, no! What the fuck?
But by the way, when I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, this is almost shittier than everything that we came up with, and it was a surprise. It made me like Solo more because I was going on a separate journey, and I was very excited for what Lotto Ball came up.
Okay. Spin-12 says even in the Clone Wars, Darth Maul was dead at the end of the cartoons. All right, right on. You know what? I'm actually super thankful to know, like, you have done me a wonderful service because you have effectively set my barometer for when I watch this movie. I will think this is the movie at which point Darth Maul just magically shows up again, and I think it can only go up from there. It's going to be wonderful.
The only other thing that I read about that was that they apparently wrote that scene and didn't put anybody in there. AKA, they had no story reason for anybody. They literally just wrote gratuitous cameo goes here, and then
they did bracket dumb underscore cameo end brackets in the script.
And then they said, well, they shot the scene with just Darth Maul. They were like, oh, wait, no, audiences aren't responding to this. We need to add something that's more Darth Maul. So they shot another version of it where he twirled his lightsaber. And they're like, yep, we got it.
My word. My word. Wow.
It was the heartiest laugh I have had in a movie since Martha. I will say that.
Were you alone laughing in the audience, or was everybody laughing?
No, I mean, there's some people that were like, yes, I know him. He was from another movie. Time.
Man, do you think they're trying to build a Star Wars cinematic universe?
I think fucking Kathleen Kennedy's trying to build a fucking resume. She's trying to build her LinkedIn page because, like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, they're complaining, and this is where the spoilers can stop. They are, at this point, Solo did a lot less than what they were expecting, and now they're blaming, like, oh, it came out only 4.5 months from when The Last Jedi came out. And it's like,
freaking Marvel movies you can release every 20 minutes and they'll all make all the money on the planet.
Because, by the way, Infinity War came out 2.5 months before Black Panther did, and Black Panther came out 3.5 months before Ragnarok did. Like, And if you want to go back,
Mitsula,
the first Captain America
Mitsula,
and Thor came out 2 months away from each other.
I hope Mitsula is telling the truth when he says, I shouted, eat shit. I would love to be in the theater for that moment. That's great.
Hey, you guys want to take a look at some show titles?
Sure.
Yeah, you know what? I actually have an appointment. We ran long on the show, and hot googly dig dog. It's been 2.5 hours.
Okay. We'll do this.
Yeah, I can hang around for just a little bit longer.
Okay, we'll do this, and then Justin and I will chat or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, I like Solo. I thought it was a fairly paint by numbers and forgettable action caper, but I didn't want to put a drill bit into my head like I did while watching Rogue One. So good on that.
Put that in the box. Our top voted one is The Koala That Got Passed Around. We also got Welcome to Gold Coast, the Miami of Australia, Shilling for Coke, Why Are You Retweeting a Bearded Nick Cage, Make Pizza with My Big Strong Hands, Adopt a Koala. Let's see, not a lot of votes so far. Episode sponsored by Uggs. Ba means no. Follow the taxidermy clues, Gumshoe. Schwood, but written upside down. Let's see. This Week in Soda. This worked. Well, we're not looking at
Night
your
Attack, no sugar. Darren Kitchen, this motherfucker.
Proud Koala Parents.
I gotta text him and find out why he went the wrong way. Fucking Australia.
Look at that lanolin. Get Bryce a passport.
I kind of like Strong Hands and Lanolin as a title. I don't know if anybody entered it, but that one's a pretty good.
Yeah,
or one of the
and
top
Lanolin.
ones about the passing around.
Yeah, I like that too. Strong Hands and lanolin. We'll do that.
Hey,
so we can
Bryce or Patrick Dillahan was complaining
shit.
that. Yeah.
Like,
So tell me,
look.
what does this look like to you, Justin?
It looks like Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Absolutely.
Are you just in Miami, Brian?
Right?
Is that why Darren took the long way around? Because it was actually closer because it's Miami? Nothing?
Could be we're actually in Miami.
Oh, okay. Hey, there you go.
They're building. They got like an Avengers tower that you can almost see over here. It's like called Q1 or O1 or something. It's got like a big slanty top up there.
Ken,
I mean, doesn't that look like a future?
gorgeous, though. Wait, what is the weather out there?
It's around 75 degrees right now, and
Damn.
today's the warmest day it'll be this week. But I mean, it's gorgeous. You can see the ocean out there. Like they got. I thought this was adorable. At this resort, they have tennis, like you would imagine. They also have hopscotch and foursquare.
Sure.
Oh shit, dude! I fucking love it.
But it reminds me a lot of Los Angeles, a lot of Huntington Beach area or whatever. Further up, like right here, it feels like Miami, and then you go 5-10 miles up there, it starts to feel like Venice Beach. It's pretty great.
Nice. Oh, I'll tell you what. All right,
Here, you can see cars driving on the wrong side of the road. Take a look at that.
Sure.
These they're crazy. Stop it! You're gonna die. Fuck it up.
It's true.
All right, well, here we can let you guys go. Please have a great time. Tell everybody we love them and kill it in your talk. All right.
All right, you got it, man. Take care, guys. Love you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool.
Hey, by the way, Bryce.
Hey.
Brian obviously is on a like this month is killer for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like this motherfucker has like this and then our tour and then like a family vacation that stretches like
A week and
somewhere
a half, 2 weeks.
between 3 and 17 weeks.
Yeah. It's Kookaburra.
Yeah. Do you need me to fill? Or are you like doing stuff? or-
Yeah, if you can give me one more minute, I just want to send this email
all
because
right.
I'm
Hey,
going to forget if I don't do it.
Pre-recorded Brian is actually being held by the Brazil Nut Mafia. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's hope he doesn't take those Brazil Nut shots because that is poison if he has the allergies.
Yeah, I couldn't find any. You would think if someone died of that, you would find news reports, but I could only find the one report of a woman having that allergic reaction. I mean, it was serious, but she didn't die from it.
I think it's probably enough that it'll be a thing that is said, right? But it's not like an epidemic or anything.
Yeah.
Is Bryce throwing a pajama jammy jam at Casa de Schwood? Are the kids there, or are the kids at the
So I don't know.
Parents.
Well, I don't know, because I thought I know that the dogs have been out and are loose in the house, so I figured, well, it could be there's just some girl coming, someone coming and feeding the dogs pretty regularly. But then we were here all day doing the bizarre briefing and recording some stuff, and Josie was around, so maybe some of them are at the parents some of the time. I don't quite know, but it's certainly not the case where we would want to have a big party.
Well, certainly not, right? Princess Dagger 17, on a scale of 1 to 10, Justin, what would you give Solo? 5. It was fun.
Wow.
Like I think giving it a number would kind of like take away from the fact that I enjoyed myself walking out of the theater. I'm always going to be predisposed to love Star Wars movies more than I am an average movie. Mm-hmm. I think if it were an average movie, number one, it would probably be plussed a little bit, because at least they wouldn't have the crutch of relying on how did Han Solo get his name, a real part of the movie if you haven't seen it.
Oh, jeez.
And but on the other hand, it'd be like, oh, this is just kind of a really forgettable kind of hit by numbers action movies.
Interesting. I saw so many like I'm using this word because I don't have a better word for it, but like defiantly positive impressions of Solo that I almost went and saw it opening weekend. Not that people were like being aggressive about it, but acting like saying that they were overwhelmingly surprised and happy with how they liked Solo, that it almost made me want to go see it. I had some scheduling.
Yeah, I would say for you, if you have no connection to the characters, then this is a rental. Like you can avoid to skip it, or you afford to skip it.
So
all right, give me 2 seconds. I have to do that.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested. I think I don't know if it was James or Gigaloop on Twitter who was saying this would be a really great movie if you don't know any of the Star Wars stuff. Maybe it was Mikey. Someone on Twitter was saying it'd be a good Star Wars movie if you had not seen or didn't care about Star Wars lore. And I mean, that's firmly where I am at, in that I don't know, they're Jedi and there's some sort of magic men, it's Harry Potter in space, but I think I'll probably eventually go see it. I actually spent a lot of the weekend or the past couple of days watching playthroughs of the new not Beyond Two Souls, what is it? Detroit Become Human, the new David Cage game from auteur game director and writer David Cage. And okay, here's my Detroit Become Human rant. There is a lot that is really good about that game and about
Hold on, wait a minute. No, stop. Exactly what you're doing, because we're gonna make this the pilot episode of video games with Bryce.
Okay. All right.
So let's go ahead and let's find some kind of music.
Oh, sure.
Fade in. This is gonna be its own episode, the first ever episode of video games! With Bryce. And I'll be the second banana. I'll be the sidekick.
Ask me questions. Be the questions guy. We'll do that. Okay, here we go. Take one.
Hold on, no, pause it. Wait a minute. This is going to be a new podcast. We have to start like a real podcast, all right? Sure. So here we go. I'll start.
Okay.
Video Games with Bryce is brought to you by HelloFresh. HelloFresh brings you new meals in your house. If you have a house and you like to eat, this is the best way to go. Also, use offer code Video Games at checkout, and you'll get a meal for your face and your family. Available for your house, HelloFresh/Video Games.
And also by HomeFresh. If you need a home to have your box meal delivery service delivered to, try HomeFresh. Get a new home every week. homefresh.com/videogames. It is May 29th, 2018. The inaugural episode of Video Games with Bryce. I'm Bryce.
I'm Justin.
We're talking video games this week. Justin.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated. I'm a little frustrated.
Why are you frustrated? There's a lot going on in video games. E3's coming up, right? There's a lot of announcements. Bethesda had a live stream where they had a bunch of assholes watch nothing all day.
Yeah, some please stand by. They announced just a couple hours ago the new, 3 new Pokemon games. A console version of Pokemon Go, basically. But then they came out with these new Pokemon, what's it called? Pokemon Let's Go, which is like a console version of the Pokemon Go phone game.
Yeah.
And then they had to turn around and say, don't worry, we're having a full-fledged Pokemon RPG come out later next year. Which is like, you really have to know your audience is not satisfied with what you're announcing.
Why didn't you sit on that one?
Yeah.
Like, that one could use a little bit. Put that one back in the oven. You don't need to tell us that a pot pie is coming. Just give us the goddamn pot pie.
Yeah. But what I'm really frustrated about is Detroit Become Human came out.
So, all right, here's something that I don't know about that game that I've only absorbed via Twitter. Looks like a pretty fun game. I've seen some reviews of it, but I don't know enough about the genre to really make a call. But I've gained by osmosis that the person who made it is somewhere between a controversial figure and a total piece of shit.
Yeah, that's David Cage is the writer and director of Detroit Become Human, and he's a very larger than life personality, right? He's the video game auteur, basically, right? He sees his games as cinematic experiences, which is fine, and believes them to be raising all of the boats of video gaming by his strong art piece.
Now, it's funny because auteur normally in cinema means that you are a writer, a director, and an actor, right? That you do the three phases of production, at least as I've understood it.
Yeah.
But it's not like you really can't do that in a video game where, like,
no, you know what?
I write everything, I code everything, and I am the star in all my video games.
I was going to say that's not... If you take out the actor, it's certainly applicable, but also his second game with the company that he works at, Quantic Dream, Indigo Prophecy, known as Fahrenheit in Europe, he actually walks out. He's like modeled in the beginning of the game and thanks you for playing his game and is excited that you get to play this interactive mystery drama from two sides.
Oh, does he have an accent?
He's French.
Oh, Jesus. Well, all right. There we go. We're off to the races. So why is he a controversial figure?
Well, there are a couple of facets to it, right? His style. I think a lot of people have a strong opinion of him based on just his writing style, which tends to be kind of cliched and generally unimaginative, rather sexist, and just flat.
So that's where the piece of shit comes in. Is that he's maybe a little Neanderthal when it comes to the gender dealings?
So there have been allegations that his development studio is a toxic workplace, which whether or not, whatever the truth on that is, it's floating out there, and it's a thing you kind of can't ignore, especially in a world where his games always tend to have scenes where women get undressed and take a shower for some reason, or get undressed, or there are gratuitous sex scenes, there are unnecessary romantic plot lines that generally are never really justified, story-wise rather. So it's frustrating.
That's a weird scene though, right? Because it's one thing if the game is pushing you toward the fact that, like, the femme fatale showed her titties, like, and then there's the other side of it with God damn it!
Like a
This is
damsel?
where I'm going to be woefully unsuited to be the host of co-host of video games. But,
Sure.
God damn it! What's the space game where you get to choose your every decision?
Mass Effect.
Mass Effect, where it's like everybody I know, man, woman, and child, is always like, "Oh my god, all I do is make my person fuck everybody. This is the best."
Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with romance and dramatic stories, but they always just don't feel cohesive. They don't feel a part of these worlds. And what really frustrates me a lot about Detroit Become Human, beyond his general writing style and whatever these allegations may turn out to be, is that you really have a lot of good ideas in Detroit Become Human. Do you even know the premise of the game?
All right, are you ready for? Here's our favorite segment on video games. Justin explains the plot of a video game based only on seeing commercials on television and reading people on Twitter.
Sure, go for it.
Detroit Becoming Human is a video game in which telling the majestic story of a town called Detroit that only is comprised of robots. And all these robots are waiting for their bus every day to get on the robot bus. And one day, one of the robots is like, "Hey, is this really a bus or is it like a prison, man?" And so begins our plot as the robots become aware of the bus they're riding on and dream of a world in which they drive cars.
Perfect so far.
And they try to conquer the city of Detroit, which of course is the most wealthy and opulent city in all the world.
I'm not gonna say that you got it right because you didn't, but I think you got
1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. How right did I get it?
I'd probably say a solid 3.5 or 4.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
We got to start somewhere.
So it follows 3 different viewpoints, 3 different android characters in Detroit. The game takes place 20 years from today, 2038, and as android production and the idea of creating artificial humanoid robots has reached a critical mass, Detroit has actually become a booming city.
Okay.
It's Detroit Android City now. And
so it is totally comprised of androids?
No, androids are kind of treated like cars a little bit. In the very near the beginning of the game, you're in a sales room of one of the Android stores, and it's like you can get this model Android for only $8,000, and we've got financing and stuff. So it's generally accessible for people.
I would say that humanoid creatures that were sold at auction was probably a different kind of metaphor that they were going for, and it's not exactly subtle.
Yeah. Well, and granted, it's not an auction, right? It's more like an Apple store. It's all fancy. It's commoditized.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So because there's no scarcity, right? So you don't need to do it at auction. I'm sure. I mean, they probably have an eBay, like not in the game, but like probably this world, you can get bespoke androids at auction.
Yeah. Craigslist.
Yeah.
They had to put the E on it because it's a cyber version of it. And you follow these 3 different characters. You follow a sort of housekeeper, a housemaker android, Kara. You follow Connor, who is an android who is assisting police investigations, and Marcus, who is the personal android of a sort of wealthy, artistic, elderly man. And the story sort of follows the idea of, well, what happens if the androids don't keep to their protocols and gain a form of sentience, what they call deviancy, where they can avoid orders, lash out, hurt human beings, make decisions for themselves, feel emotions. And what happens when that erupts in a world where, despite the fact that androids are pretty readily available, they're also generally not liked, because and I think this is what gets me. This right here is a good kernel of an idea, a world where you have androids readily available across internationally, and they to the point where they are raising the unemployment rate because androids are able to do a lot of jobs that humans are doing. And so humans are really upset about this, even though, let's remember that humans are buying and creating the androids. But
there's a class element. There's an upper class and lower class, and the upper class is replacing effectively the worth of the lower class by way of buying the androids.
Yeah, but instead of like instead of like extrapolating from that and like, well, okay, so this is a society that's becoming on its way to becoming post-labor, or in some semblance post-labor. What does that look like? How do you extrapolate into this new thing we don't know, but we are getting closer to as automation and artificial intelligence affect, industrial labor here in America now?
Sure. Although I can get a sense where somebody who is very sure of their own ideas can take a central premise like that and then beat it within an inch of its own life to the point where you're like, okay, we get it. Like, this is a thing that happens. You're kind of doing a slavery allegory, but it's in the future. And ultimately it's like, there's the difference between plot and story, right? And the plot can be interesting, but the story can be garbage. And that's the other element that I have taken in by osmosis, is that maybe the story isn't quite as exciting as maybe the premise has been.
Yeah, I think it's a good premise, and I think this is I think that this is a trend of these Quantic Dreams games, is that they're really good premises. The idea is like, what if you, the player, are not controlling a character, but you're controlling a supernatural character who is basically haunting Ellen Page? What happens there? That's a cool premise, but the execution is lacking. And what's really frustrating about Detroit is that not only is the execution lacking, it doesn't extrapolate what it actually would mean for android sentience, other than to tell a slavery revolt story with the aesthetics of androids. There are a lot of points, especially in the back half of the game, where you kind of forget that these are very quick thinking, very smart, and free will having, machines. In that sense, they are human, but the fact of the matter is that they're not human. You need to treat them as other than human.
And that's the problem is, with those stories, you really have to pick what kind of story you're telling, because the stories that you have at your disposal with that premise are very different. You can tell a kind of cloak and dagger spy story, right, where you are trying to coordinate with the resistance, and that's kind of like what you see in like Handmaid's Tale, right? Is a
underground simmering, behind the shadows sort
exactly,
of
where it's like, it's a lot of like, please get a message to my wife, or please, we need to have the coordinates so we know where the supply run goes, or we need to know whether or not this shadowy figure is indeed a turncoat or somebody that is trying to lure us out. There's a lot of those, and it's a very different story than the other side, which is war, rebellion, right? And that's a story that kind of rushes to the end, and then if you want to extend it, then it's like, all right, then you're rushing to like, we're storming the castle. Do we kill the king? Yes or no?
Yeah. How do we take over?
Yeah. If we kill everybody but the king, then now do we have to retreat because reinforcements are coming? Or do we kill the king and now this is about us turning on each other? Like, there's all these different kinds of ways you can go, but they're very different in terms of the action. Because one is a lot of simmering, and then you can end that story by saying, oh, we kill the commissioner, the police commissioner, and like, the war isn't won, but a significant battle is, right? Or you can tell the other one where it's like, all right, either we kill the king or we don't.
Yeah. And Detroit Become Human really is in that second category of kind of a blockbuster revolt story of these are my people, and one of these characters becomes a messiah for android people, and that it feels flat. It's got good moments, it has good set pieces, it has good ideas, but it's like you mentioned, right? It's got the plot's fine at most given points, but the story is just pretty weak. And then you also just get into the fact that you have these three different viewpoints, and for most of the story, one of those characters does not really meet or interact with the other two at all. When they are in the same place, it's incidental. And the other sort of off-putting thing about it is the co-opting of historical emancipation movements. There's a scene where you are tagging this sort of downtown plaza area, and you're allowed to pick the slogan and the logo of your movement, and you have such options like "We have a dream," and "Android Lives Matter," and it's
so like all the subtlety comes in with the effortless butterfly landing of a sledgehammer.
Right. And what's frustrating about that is that all of those allegories, all of the technically subtext in all of that is analogous to historical emancipations. And that's more of my frustration of not extrapolating this. This is saying, what if android independence was very similar to African American independence? What if it was similar to the rescue of the Jewish people from the World War II? And that's frustrating, because you're trying to tell a story where androids are trying to be treated as human, but the fact of the matter is that any even light speculative fiction would have to change that formula, because they're still machines. They're not human. Whether they have an animus is one thing, but the fact of the matter is that these are machines that are just not human, that are not created the same, have more capabilities than humans, and it kneecaps their abilities, and it kneecaps the story to just treat it like history, right? When instead of the future.
Yeah, I mean, this is not something that I think I'd be interested in playing. Not that many things are interested in playing it, but like, I think storytelling in an interactive setting is very, very interesting, and it's why I think that it makes like Mikey so great at breaking down movie scripts, because he is, to write really good interactive fiction, you need to have so many of your like principal kind of basics nailed down.
Yeah.
Like you have to know where you're going, because you need to anticipate every possible option and understand that even every option that you give to the user is a part of the art. You need to anticipate what they would want to do and then give them tantalizing options, either A, B, or C.
Mm-hmm.
And for something like this, it's like, look, we have had, not to say that the emancipation of those that are enslaved is ever something that will not be provocative. It will always be provocative.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of those kinds of stories, from Moses on, right? In whatever we would consider the ever evolving pop culture, mm-hmm. that it's like, unless you got a different spin on it, unless you have
something fresh, something that understands is relevant to the content, which should be about androids, a society where androids are prevalent.
Yeah. or have, tell the story of what happens when the first android mayor comes in and now there is, an assassination attempt, or there are other android forces that are like, hey, look, we need to restrict the capital, wealth, and influence of the humans, because they've subjugated us for so long, and now we need to rectify the balance, have everybody pay their fair share, whatever you want to do. I think there's a lot of really, really interesting stories that you can tell with this as an allegory, but like I do agree with you that the trope of like, is your toaster really a slave? Is like,
it's hack.
Yeah.
In short, it's kind of hack. The other thing that frustrates me, and this is why I'm not going to say it's a bad game, because I think everything around the story is generally pretty good. You have a really good engine, in fidelity-wise. They are doing really great vocal performances, motion capture, facial capture performances.
Are there any famous people that are doing the things?
There are a few. There are a few people you might know. Let me pull up the IMDb so I don't get any names wrong, because I didn't know them by hand, but there's
like character actors, like the other guy from that thing.
So you got Jesse Williams. That's it. Who plays Marcus? He's from, is it ER? No, that's not right. He's in Grey's Anatomy. That's it. He's from Grey's Anatomy and Cabin in the Woods. You've also got Clancy Brown, who is a supporting character. He's pretty good.
So a lot of that guys.
A little bit, yeah. It's not the big 1-2 punch from Quantic Dream's last game, where you had Ellen Page and Willem Dafoe sort of be your main characters.
So they definitely they overspent there on talent to make a name for themselves.
Possibly, though. But by that point, Quantic Dream, in the realm of narrative games, Quantic Dream are powerhouses. They are making good games. This game looks incredible. It plays well. The idea of using joystick gestures, motion control gestures, the touchpad gestures to replicate what the characters are doing on screen is a very good idea, and it's a level of interactivity that feels organic, and allows the player to actually feel like they have control. I play a lot of those Telltale games, and what's so frustrating is that those games just haven't evolved in their interactive element. There are some, especially on like Minecraft story mode, which was for kids, but like that game has a lot of sequences where literally the only thing you have to do to get from point to point is to just hold forward so that you can trigger the next cutscene. Even the good Telltale games have that, of just like, we just need you.
It seems like it just really wants to be a novel, right?
Right. Or like a very bare bones point and click game, an adventure game. These are adventure games. But it's the balance of where you put the narrative alongside where you put the interactivity. And I don't think that there's one right answer. You look at old LucasArts games, old classic point and click adventure games where it's very puzzle heavy. You're collecting a lot of items. You have a lot of rabbit holes to put stuff in. And you have a story, right? Like, you're playing Leisure Suit Larry. That guy he's a loser and he's trying to get laid. And then you have the other side where you're trying to tell a bigger blockbustery type story. And the engine that they've got, then the work that they've put into Detroit Become Human is very good work. It's just that the ideas aren't there, and the story doesn't encapsulate what the near future is. If you're telling me that this game takes place 20 years in the future, and if we continue to see technology move at an exponential rate, it's not the craziest idea that something like this could happen. But you have to tell me, you have to treat that game like it's the future and not the past.
Well, but ultimately, it's like, depending on where it is, you can tell a lot of the same stories in any kind of time frame.
Yeah,
it's a matter of when you get to, well, this would have been better, this kind of flavoring, ultimately I think that's blaming the symptom and not the disease. And the disease is I didn't give a fuck about these characters. Like you can make a very simple story work if you give a shit about the characters and the characters have good, interesting, meaty conflicts that lead them to interesting revolutions based on decisions that they have to make that you can invest yourself in.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's where I think video games can, on the best side, shine, and on the worst side, they fob off the like, well, no. The real interesting part is that the user gets to make these decisions. And it's like, that's a cop-out, because ultimately what you want to do is have them make a flavor of a kind of decision that you have pointed them in the direction of.
Well,
and
but
like,
then you get into the question of like, what is the totality of player choice in these games, right? You look at a lot of Telltale games, and the choices that you have, can be heavy, but they all tend to end you up in the same place. And especially
they're
when
basically choose your own adventure books, right? Like those Telltale games are effectively just, hey, look, we wrote out a bunch of shit, and it's in a universe that wouldn't you like to read our
short story about it,
our fanfic about your favorite, about Batman, about Walking Dead, about whatever? And it's like, that's cool. I think that to me is the best use of fucking fanfic. Like, I'd rather play through it in a way with licensed iconography than I would read it in an ebook. But I'm not really a fanfic guy. Don't fucking at me, fanfic fans.
Please, everyone, email in what Justin's ships should be.
Yeah. And I think, like,
yeah,
either you give a shit about these characters or you don't.
And you do. The characters and the attention that's given to the characters is a strong point of Detroit Become Human. I think you generally feel with where the characters are trying to go, right? You are able to empathize based on the emotional storytelling of, a homemaker who is trying to save a little girl that she, took away from an abusive household, or a police android who is seeing all of these murders at the hands of androids with free will and wrestling with if free will is something that he has or is capable of having. I think the characters are really strong, generally, but the things that they
that's also
doing,
considering everything else that you told me, if that's the plot of the police android, that's also a little hashtag problematic.
Well, also, yes, there are a few smaller moments that aren't like really pounded home, but there are a few small moments where it's like, oh, you're really just using all the imagery you can get, and extrapolate that as you will. The other frustrating thing about the game is that, and this goes directly to writing and execution, is that it doesn't follow its own internal logic. It doesn't follow the rules of this universe. 99.999% of the game, you are controlling these three characters. And while the game doesn't get into the idea of like, well, what's the player's role in this? Is the player, say, a sign of deviancy? What does that mean for the choices of various characters as they wrestle with their sense of consciousness, which also, again, at certain points doesn't gel. But there's a point near the end of the game in at least a certain outcome where you are controlling a character who, for no reason, you're controlling. You're doing a press conference and you're taking questions as a person you've never had control over. And it's not a twist. It's not some big reveal or anything. It's just we need to have a moment
that the writer's putting in because the writer wanted to do it. And that's often the most frustrating things in narrative fiction, right? Is when things are just kind of happening because the writer needs them to happen and there's no world reason why.
Yeah. It's been 10 minutes and we haven't had you make a choice yet. So we're going to make sure you're awake and give you some meaningless choice. Yeah. It's weird. We had in the chat earlier, are there multiple and varied outcomes in the game? I will say that there's about, I'm trying to think of the general way that the game can end. Part of the way that these games eke out endings is that all of the characters at various points are able to die, and you're able to just lose that plot line, and the rest of the story adjusts to the variables that those characters do and don't bring. Yeah. And it makes for some really interesting moments of like, oh, well, you didn't let a lot of characters die, so in this moment in the game, you don't have a lot of corpses to look at or to examine or get clues from. This is a very strong parallel back to Indigo Prophecy, where you play as a man who gets possessed and murders someone, and the policewoman who is trying to solve the murders. Yeah.
All right.
That stuff's fine, but in the end, there are only 3 or 4 general ways that the story can end if you are able to see it to its conclusion.
So let's go ahead and give it the official video games of primary color wheel selection. So of all the primary colors, what are you, host Bryce Castillo, going to give Detroit: Becoming Human?
I'd give Detroit Become Human of the primary colors only, red, blue, green.
Only the primary colors. Yeah, that's the official.
That's how we do it here.
Review scale of video games, the podcast.
I'd give it a blue. I think that there are plenty of people where these writing issues are not a big deal. You're gonna like the interactive elements, which are very good. And it really is built in a very highly replayable way, right? At the end of each chapter, it'll show you the decision tree chart of like, okay, you chose to do this, so you went this way. But there's a thing that you didn't pick, and so we're not going to show you what it is, but you know that it's there. I think it's blue. It's depressing and disappointing for me. But
blue is not only the primary emotion that you will feel playing the game, it is also what you felt playing the game, in that you were depressed that this game was not better than it could have been.
Yeah. I think you have a really great staff. You have great technology here, and the bottleneck is not on the development side. It's on the creative side, and that certainly makes me blue.
This does seem like an odd time for the game to come out, because it obviously made enough noise that it registered on my radar, not only in terms of Twitter, but also like I saw commercials and stuff for it. Like it had enough of a cinematic look that it was something that they would peddle to average sports fans or something like that.
Well, and you know, this is a moment for Sony. Quantic Dream is. You could look at Quantic Dream and say that they're a second-party developer. They're not owned by Sony, but they tend to make Sony games.
Yeah.
And Sony has a very strong track record right now of right off the heels of God of War. They had Horizon Zero Dawn last year. There was another game that just came out. But Sony exclusives are hitting it out of the park lately.
They've been riding high.
Yeah. And you have a game that probably won't do well for hardcore or just core gamers, but you have a game that is an easy sell. It's a big blockbuster, interactive, strong technology story, and you can get semi-casual players into that. And that is the niche that I think Detroit Become Human is meant to fill, is people who kind of want a big action-y story, but maybe don't want all of the nuance that a narrative game should and can tell.
Well, all right. As we end every episode of Video Games, we now move into our controversial opinion, where Bryce has a very controversial opinion about a video game that everybody holds dear, because if we know that there's one thing that video game fans are very, very excited about, is to hear contrarian opinions based on their favorite things. Bryce,
sure.
What is your unpopular opinion this week?
God of War does not look like a very good game.
Does not look like what?
Does not look like a very good game. I don't. There is a lot about that does not excite me. It's a very good technology, very good performance.
Oh,
but
shit!
Wait,
so you have not played God of War?
I haven't played it. I've watched a lot of people play it, and this is what turned me off: is everybody just throws the axe the whole time. You're this big hulking god killer, literally, and you're just throwing your axe the whole time. And not slicing, not dicing. They're just throwing. I'm like, fuck that. I don't know. I don't want that.
Shit. Oh, shit. By the way, This unpopular opinion is proving to be exactly that. Very unpopular. People are lighting you up. Tell you what, you can send your emails to Bryce personally because there's no infrastructure for this show. And go ahead and yell at Bryce directly at Brycus on Twitter, where he now doesn't really speak in actual sentences. He literally just has hilarious gibberish.
I also do good puns. I had a good pun the other day. I had what was it?
90% of them are cum related, but there certainly are cum puns.
They are cuns.
Come for the puns and stay for the cum puns when you go to @Brycus.
That's right.
On Twitter. My Twitter is @Brycus. And fuck you. You're a piece of shit. Zelda sucks.
Oh, this was the one I was proud of recently. Flambe.
And no, they're all good. I really like this new direction for your Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Here and finally, here's Justin's last word.
Yeah, give us your last word, Justin.
What's all this talk about? It's a battlefield with the lady. Like, it's not about all ladies in the in the video game, right? Like, it's just they have a lady on the cover. Like, I understand that there are historical inaccuracies to the idea that all the ladies are fighting World War II. It wasn't an all-lady affair. In fact, when you look at the records, there were quite a paucity of women who fought in that war. However, it is a video game, so. What the fuck is going on, everybody? Why are we getting so worked up about this? I need to understand. And if your answer is, well, because they're triggering, or you're trying to appeal to the SJWs, and you are going away from your core audience, really it's a cover. Maybe if the ladies showed more titties. Okay. People would have less of a problem.
We're calling this final word from Justin loose skirts.
I'm just saying. I don't know. I really have no idea what it is. All I know is that people were really upset about it, and I liked poking the bear on Twitter. And the funniest thing is that you told me that that wasn't even at the point that I got to the battlefield thing. That wasn't even the hot bird saddle when it came to the video game industry.
Yeah, people had already moved on to Detroit by that time.
Oh, so people were upset about that guy in that studio.
Yeah, reacting to it, and there was frustration that like the reviewing community touched very little on the idea of the allegations because he's in Europe and a lot of European reviewers are scared of libel laws over there. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. Take that up with your shitty countries.
What I loved about the Battlefield thing is that one of the developers, it was either on Reddit or like the developer blogs or something, made a post that was like, "Hey, this Battlefield game, if you're upset that it's inaccurate because it's got women in it, you're not going to be having a real good time when you see that 3 people can ride a horse and all have flamethrowers at the very same time."
Well, look, I mean, like, and to be honest with that stuff, I am genuinely kind of like baffled by the politics that are touched off in video games, and I think that there is a reason for it beyond just being like, what are you jackoffs getting all riled up about, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that there is something personal about video games that is a reason why this is a cultural touchstone beyond either people being triggered libs or, man babies who can't adjust to the modern world. There has to be something more primal here if these culture wars, for whatever reason, keep being centered on this very weird, bespoke, spot of land. But I'm genuinely kind of like curious as to why the front lines of the culture war are fought on the front cover of the Battlefield game.
It's tough, and every time there's something like this, it becomes exposed to new people who don't know the currents of these dust ups that happen every 6 to 10 months, and it always tends to be from a very particular crowd who have a very particular perspective and want very particular things, and anything that is anything that could be interpreted as the casualization, the feminization, the dumbing down and sanding the edges of the thing that they like and know, it becomes a flame war essentially. It's
Well, yeah, and I saw it with my buddy Aubrey Citizen, who was doing the GI Joe comic, and then it turned into a goddamn hellfire because he changed one character to a Samoan woman, and I guess it did shit that people didn't like. There was a front of people that were very upset about his callous handling of the GI Joe thing, and then he made a fairly out of pocket fucking comment about how people who didn't live in Manhattan during 9/11 have less of a right to complain about 9/11. But you want to know what? Aubrey's a flamethrower. It's what he did. That's fine. But yeah, I have a high threshold for people to be totally out of pocket if they are entertaining and interesting, and that's who Aubrey is. And so I love.
You look at conversations in comics and visual novels or big comics, from the past year or two, right? You have, oh man, they made Captain America a real Nazi. Oh, how could they do that? Oh, they made Thor a woman. How could they do that? Oh, they made Miss Marvel, a Middle Eastern girl. How could they do that? And part of it is that someone probably maybe knows that creating something new and controversial will create attention, and you'll get people riled up, even though these are people who should know better and know that these are temporary things that don't mean anything, just so that they can have something to be upset about, something that they can boycott and have something to protest.
Yeah, I mean, look, I genuinely am more curious on this than I am here to make a statement.
Sure.
Like on all that, because I do think that there are sociological elements of this that I am fascinated by, because I don't think that the non-death thready facets of our culture that we kind of brand as reactionary are necessarily terrible people. I think when I see a lot of these situations, what I think the most of is when Brian and I get into fights. And we have discussed this previously on Night Attack, not the same show as this, which is Video Games, a new show featuring Bryce and I. And we're going to do it on the Night Attack channel, and I don't care if you narc us out sign. Is that it's two hurt butts rubbing against each other, complaining about how the other one is hurting the other one's butt, right? Like it is the weaponization of victimhood, the weaponization of empathy. And I think we're in a very interesting phase in our culture where a lot of these things wind up spilling out on seemingly who gives a shit art valves, be it video games or comics or movies or whatever. Like, and that's very interesting to me, is that this is where we're fighting this. Now, obviously we're fighting it in a lot of places. People are fighting about this in a lot of facets of culture, but the things that I see that I almost feel like they're isolatable because they're not real. Who gives a fuck what the video game is? The most famous video games are nonsensical, like ridiculousness that are great because of the mechanics.
Yeah.
Like we don't really give a fuck about the themes. Mario could be a bird and he could be going after pellets instead of eggs, and we'd still love it because the mechanics are really cool.
Yeah. I mean, look at you look at the highest selling video game of all time, which is Grand Theft Auto 5. 5? Yeah, 5. That is a story that begins and ends. It's a fine story. It's an action movie, It's an action movie about two old men and a younger guy trying to be weird bad guys, and they do it. But the reason that game is the highest selling any piece of media ever in the history of time is because it's a good shoot 'em up game. People like getting in cars and blowing shit up. And whether the story exists or not doesn't change the fact that is a to be reductionist is a Skinner box and makes people feel good when they play it.
Yeah. Well, and look, this isn't to say that themes don't matter, because if it were, Mario were a doctor and instead of collecting coins, he was punching fetuses, like it would now be a political statement, right?
Yeah.
So
but also
it's very interesting to me, and that's where like stuff like the Battlefield thing, I really do want to listen more, and understand, because there's gotta be a root element here. There's gotta be there was something here beyond the noise and beyond your SJWs, your reactionary. Like there
has to be there has to be something more fundamental, and maybe it just is that at the scale of any entertainment medium, there will always be a detracting side, and because all of these pillars of entertainment have gotten so large, even a very small percentage of that fan base is large enough to write articles about, or to have, this always happens to me when there's something very similar to this outside of my wheelhouse, where I will only see the counter reactions to things on my social media. The most recent being the new Thundercats show. There's a new Thundercats show. They're reviving it because they're reviving everything, because of course you would, because
and it looks like Steven Universe animation, right?
Yeah. And I guess people are upset about it, but what I see is always like the staunch defense of hey, you should know that, like, they made lots of these realistically drawn cartoons and they were also bad, or whatever the case is in defense of it. And that's also a very weird thing, because it's like I literally don't know the problem, other than I guess they just don't like the way it looks. But if that's the case, then you don't need to tell people. Like, when you get to the point where the people are getting death threats, then you have to say, yes, stop fucking making death threats, because that's ridiculous.
Oh, sure, but that's one of those things that I almost feel like, hey, look, like, there are elements that, before we get into this blood feud level of like we're all picking sides and it's Hatfields and McCoys and we can justify anything,
we have to have a baseline of what is acceptable on both sides.
If you're just like at your work and someone's like, oh my God, you see someone just fucking called and threatened Stacy's life, you're not like, well, what'd she say? It's like, oh my God, Stacy? Fucking no. No one should be calling and threatening her life, right? Yeah. Like we all have that initial thought.
But then you get people who know animation, are doing animation, whether it's for TV, whether it's for the internet or whatever, and they see little things like that, and that becomes the reason to maybe not overly is not the right word, but to defend something that by its own existence doesn't need defense of its existence.
I totally agree. I think that there's one thing that social media has kind of, and this is not social media's fault, because it was beginning to happen with broadcast media, like in the 70s, right? Mm-hmm. That we've magnified, and now on social media it almost feels like it is at the most suffocating it's ever been, that nobody doing it to everybody's doing it is faster than it's ever been before. Mm-hmm. Like now it's like some dick with 60 followers says something and that's retweeted by somebody with 1.5 million, and now all the Sturm und Drang is about, like, this is what people are saying. Like, fuck you, mister. And now it's everybody replying, yeah, fuck you, fuck this. I can't fucking believe this. Can you believe? And now everybody's retweeting that initial thing.
Well, and I think that there are two factors to this, right? The idea of magnifying a dissenting opinion. I think dissenting opinions are fine, but magnifying it to such a large audience that people are naturally want to take a side. I agree with this or I don't agree with this. You brought this to me, and now in a world where we have unlimited, unlimited print space, I'm going to say my thing. But you also add the anonymity of social media, where people become more emboldened to say shit that they would never say, or say them in a way that they would never say. We get a lot of responses in various places that I think if you were face to face with me or anyone, you wouldn't say it that way. But because there is what a lot of people believe is a buffer or some sort of membrane between our two entities, that you become more boisterous because you think you either want to break through or that you're not going to break through. And in either case, you're going to be fine. I think those two things contribute to why everything becomes a thing so quickly. It's why we have things like the dress or Lonnie and Jarl, right? Because it's at its core, here's an idea. How do you feel about it? And if it picks up just enough traction, if it's just enough mainstream, you will get plenty of people who have their own ideas and say, "Oh, if you hear Yanni, you're a dummy. If you hear Laurel, you should go to the Hague." It's.
I mean, look, it is probably the most fascinating element of our culture of my lifetime, and I will hope to understand it more as we go forward, because I do think that it is an ongoing explanation and not something where we want to assign everything to a value and then draw lines on it. And I think that there are elements here that I think are deeper. But you want to know what? That'll be for another episode of video games. Thank you to HelloFresh and Fresh Home.
That's right.
Please use offer codes video games at checkout, and you'll get things. Bryce, what would you like to plug?
I'm gonna plug my Twitter at Brycast, BRYCAS, and of course you can catch us on Twitch at Night Attack every single week.
Yeah, and also I'd like to say fuck you, and if you have anything to say to me, hit me up at Brycas, BRYCAS.
That's right. For another episode of Video Games, I'm Bryce.
I'm Justin.
Keep playing games.
Video games specifically.
That was fun.
One in the can.
We did it. That was good. I liked that. I liked that. We got deep on kind of everything. We got a little real, got a little critique. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, all that shit's really interesting. All right, here. Toilet Bug asked what my experience is on Bart with shit.
Like
I don't
feces?
see a lot of shit on Bart, but I do see a lot of shit outside in the stations. Brian is calling me.
Oh.
Right now. Here, let's go ahead and take it.
He almost certainly thinks that we can't possibly still be on the internet.
Hi, Brian. You're on the Night Attack show.
Oh, fantastic. I went and had my meeting, and it went really well. And I was actually calling to say what a fun show that was and how worried I was after having that migraine this morning, whether or not we'd hit our stride. But hot damn, funny stuff. It was really great.
I agree. No, I think it was awesome. We're actually about to wrap up the stream here. You mind if I call you back?
Yeah, go for it. But tell everyone that I love them and I'm secretly jealous of all their talents.
Okay, I will.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Ryan says he loves you and he's secretly jealous of all your talents.
Oh, how out of character for Brian Brushwood.
No, what a fucking asshole. All right. That'll be it for me. What do you say we wrap up this motherfucker?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for checking out the Tuesday show. It means a lot that you guys came out.
Also, listen to that Pusha T track. Pusha T murdered Drake. Drake's dead now. Drake died.
Oh, man. Rest in peace, Drake.
R.I.P. Drizzy.
Dead at 49 years old.
Six God. Buried 6 feet under.
Have a good night, guys.